Your Excellency, Your Eminences, I say thank you. I'm actually representing Archbishop Gabriel Mbilingi, the Archbishop of Lubango, Angola, who is the new president of Sekhem. He was invited, but for one reason or the other could not be here. So I'm going to try to give just excerpts of his paper. Just a brief information on Sekhem. The Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar was formed in July 1969 and was blessed by Pope Paul VI on his historic visit to Uganda. Sekhem brings together over 500 dioceses on the African continent. We are divided in 8 episcopal regions, and Sekhem represents about 20% of Africa's population. It was established to promote unity, justice, and development for the peoples of Africa. And one of our objectives is to preserve, to foster, and to promote communion, action, and collaboration among all the episcopal conferences in Africa, particularly in the domain of human promotion and integral development. And it is in that link that for us, the celebration of Pacem in Terris is very, very propitious. Sekhem has always shown concern for issues pertaining to peace and human development, and because of that, not too long ago, Sekhem set up a Department of Justice, Peace, and Development in our Secretariat. I would just avoid repeating what has been said about Pacem in Terris and see how we are implementing it so far. The Church in Africa lives and works in the society in which she encounters the challenges of human selfishness, greed, pain, and suffering in the midst of plenty. Sekhem has always called for righteousness and justice on the African continent, as the prophet Amos normally exhorts us to. And in order to do that, Sekhem has always worked in building capacities and coordinating activities, relying on technical and advocacy expertise from the region and outside the region, in promoting regional and international action for ensuring peace and development. Sekhem, through its Justice, Peace and Development Department, has been engaged in several consultations on good governance, development effectiveness, on extractive industries and their impact assessment, on the natural resources and climate change, on migration and development, on HIV and AIDS, through what we call thematic working groups. Ahead of 2010 United Nations General Assembly meeting dedicated to the MDGs, Sekhem organized together with SIDSE advocacy to 8 European countries, and also had meetings with some of the political leaders as well as the European Parliament and the European Union. In 2012, the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, in collaboration with Sekhem, held a series of regional seminars for bishops and coordinators of justice and peace commissions, all aimed at building our regional and our national episcopal and social capacities in the face of development, particularly basing ourselves not only on Pacem in Terris, but also on Caritas in Veritate, on Ecclesia in Africa, and then on Africe Munus. Culminating from some of these, we have had what we call the Sekhem Policy Forum, which had its first meeting in 2012, and it is aimed at keeping our bishops informed of international developments that affect our different countries. And in that line, Sekhem at one time had to send a message to the president, or what we call the president of Liberia, who is co-chair of the high-level panel for the Millennium Development Goals, in order to advocate that priority should be given to the voices of the poorest in shaping what will be called the Sustainable Development Goals after 2015. We go to also our Holy Father, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, in his Caritas in Veritate, and especially in Africae Munus, where he exhorts us, particularly in Africa, that peace is not just a gift to be received, but it is also a task that we should undertake. And in order to be true peacemakers, he calls us to educate ourselves in compassion, solidarity, working together, in fraternity, being active with the community, and concerned to raising awareness about national and international issues, and also the importance of seeking adequate mechanisms for the redistribution of wealth, the promotion of growth, cooperation for development, and conflict resolution. This was in his message in 2011 about the message for World Day of Peace. I would just go to the last few points. What Sekhem has been doing, all encouraged by Pacem in Terris, by Populorum Progressio, by the post-synodal apostolic exhortations, Ecclesia in Africa and Africae Munus, because you will be given the paper, so I don't need to go into details. Sekhem definitely has recommended, particularly to African leaders, to develop a vision of mobilizing Africa, a vision that is driven by the quest for respect of the common good, jealousy of her sovereignty, and resolutely focused on unity, just as my dear professor just finished talking about. This means the involvement without discrimination of the citizenry in the definition and the implementation of a social pact that translates the general will, that guarantees the stability and improvement of living conditions for all, and promotes equity and justice, particularly in Africa. We, as bishops of Africa, believe that peace and development will only be sustainable for all and address the real and felt needs of the communities if they themselves are engaged in the planning, in the decision-making, and the implementation of any action that affects them. We have been talking about transparency and accountability. We have been working for the promotion of social cohesion and conflict resolution, particularly thanks to Africae Munus 157, where the Pope calls on the continent to embark on reconciliation as a necessary component also to peace. In order to complement the efforts of our various governments in peace building, governance, and democratic transition, Sekhem has also requested an observer status on the African Union. Not only on the African Union, I know that on the regional bodies, we have also requested observer status so that the church can bring her voice to bear in these continents. Let me conclude by saying that the church in Africa, thanks to the popes, John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul the 2nd, Pope Emeritus Benedict the 16th, and even our new Pope, we believe in the prophetic statement that was made by Pope Emeritus Benedict the 16th on the 4th of October 2009 and repeated in Africae Munus, that Africa is one of the spiritual lungs of humanity. And therefore the popes are encouraging us to take up our role in the development of peace and to ensure, indeed, that we can bring our contribution to what must be done to make the world a better place. Thank you very much.